working in group scenarios or doing presentations in front of the entire class, this is how we learned how to, manage a classroom, or this is how we learned how to assess students, that we need to have some sort of oral communication portion to our grades. So we have to be able to monitor how students are presenting their work. And that's not necessarily the case. Just because we've been doing it for so many years, it doesn't necessarily have to be that way in our classrooms. We can set up our classrooms however you want. And you mentioned that, we have a multitude of different types of learners in our classrooms, and we have to be able to accommodate for all of our learners in our room. And this comes from that. I think that sometimes we get hung up on this idea that, oh, well, we have to learn how to do presentations because when we get older and we become adults, we're all going to have to do presentations. Well, is that necessarily true? Do we all necessarily need to be working in group settings? Is this something that we should be forcing on our students at the elementary school level, at the high school level, on a constant basis, just because we think it's going to exist in the future?
The shifting of pedagogies to sort of the problem-based learning and the authentic learning, although exceptionally valuable, have also lent ourselves to really celebrate and want to encourage students to be that active voice in group situations, that extroverted learner in group situations. And we inadvertently take that introverted learner, that quiet learner, to maybe think that they're not being productive in group settings or aren't contributing enough to these authentic learning situations. And that's one of those things when you sort of shift pedagogy. It's like the law of unintended consequences. No one's trying to alienate introverted learners, but in this big swing to more group-oriented, the idea of, like, you hear on Twitter people talk, well, we don't want a quiet classroom. Well, why would you not at some point? Aren't some students who need that quiet space? But that's the safe thing to say, and no one's going to call you on that, right? That learning should be loud and lots of talk and lots of discussion. But not everyone is actually going to have productive and valuable, rich learning in that type of environment. And so there's nothing wrong with those moments, but to think that those are the only things that define great learning and rich learning and in this authentic learning, we have kids all over the place and moving and talking and sharing and blah, 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 which are important, but we've placed so much emphasis on that we have inadvertently, the law of unintended consequences, forgotten about our introverted learners and possibly left them looking for a safe space, looking for their role, looking for their space in the classroom dynamics. And so our introverted learners are really where we want to talk about today. Make sure that we're aware of they're in our classes, they're in our spaces, and not that we are maliciously trying to exclude them from the learning, but the law of unintended consequences, they are being missed in some of our problem-based learning, our group learning, our overemphasis, not even necessarily overemphasis, our emphasis on this has neglected them.
I think that something that we should come back to is taking a look at how each person falls on this introverted to extroverted spectrum, because essentially it is a spectrum. You and I have talked about this, that you and I both fall on different parts